Well, something new going on right now, but Napoleonic nonetheless. I just got this copy of Close Quarter Battles Waterloo. This is a new tactical game from Lock and Load Publishing. I don't even think it's out yet. I think it's very shortly going to be available to customers. But I want to thank Lock and Load. They sent me a copy. I've seen this for a couple of years in a row, actually, at the local convention up here in Seattle, where they've been demoing it, and it has caught my eye each and every time. And that is because it is a Napoleonic tactical game at the company scale, so very, very zoomed in. And we'll talk a little bit about that as I go through. I want to show you kind of what comes in here. There have been a couple other folks who have done some unboxings of this, but I'm going to attempt to do not just an unboxing, but sort of a background and some informational content around what Close Quarters Battle Waterloo is. So again, this is pretty unusual for Lock and Load Publishing, at least Lock and Load as we have known them, getting into the Napoleonics era, but we have had First Victories Wellington versus Napoleon already this year. And this is another Napoleonic game done by Lock and Load. And before I open the box, I just want to point out this cover is stunning. I absolutely love the artwork here. It looks like something out of a graphic novel, sort of overlaid over a map of the Battle of, looks probably Waterloo. This is the first in what is going to be, I guess, a planned series that covers tactical situations in famous battles in the horse and musket era. So while the first game here is Napoleonic, it doesn't necessarily mean that every game has to be Napoleonic according to the documentation inside the game. So let's get this open. I just want to stare at this cover forever, but this is a big 3-inch box, as we have seen from Lock and Load's most recent batch of games with First Victories and JU87 Stuka Ace. And there's one other one that I'm forgetting right now. But anyways, this is what the box looks like. We'll set that off to the side, and I'll explain this background here in a moment. So when we open the box, we get the Core Rules version 1.0. Now, I've already gone through this and looked at everything in here, but I just want to show you. It is spiral bound, as we saw in First Victories. It is a really nice cover sheet here. The paper quality is great. Lots of full color illustrations. The rulebook itself is 68 pages. Here you can see some of the counters. And that does seem like a lot, but actually it is very generously spaced. The text is nice and large. There's lots of pictures. The layout here is excellent. And actually, it is not actually a 68-page rulebook or whatever it is. I think it's, 68 because the index starts on page 70. Here are the credits. Andrew Glenn is the game designer. So let's make sure that we say that. So Lock and Load Publishing, Andrew Glenn, the designer. And as you can see, it gives you a really detailed overview of the components, a really nicely laid out format. This did not take me long to read at all. This is probably, if you shrink it down to sort of a GMT size or Compass game size rule book with the text and all of that stuff, this is probably only about 20 to 30 pages of rules maybe. And it's actually not very complicated. It's very comprehensive. It's very well written. I've read the whole thing. And I have a really good sense of how to play the game. Nothing is really left out here, and it's all very easily understandable. So really well done rule book, it seems. I haven't played the game yet, but it seems. And it's interesting. You don't really see Napoleonic era games at the company scale. So there's some really unique things about that in terms of like formations and sort of what you're portraying as part of the game. The one thing I did want to get to, which I think is really cool, is this optional rule here. So oftentimes in war games, we talk about like, well, who are you as the player? Like what role do you occupy in what's happening on your tabletop? And frequently you are some sort of omniscient commander, omniscient god who has full, perfect information of the battlefield and what you're doing and what's going on. And that can be for some players a disconnect in terms of like the thematic linkage to the history or the setting. What's interesting that this game does, it seeks to answer that question, or at least give you an option for that question, which is, as an optional rule, you and your opponent can be represented on the map with an individual player counter. So you as the player can be one of the leaders in these engagements. And based on how you behave and how you perform during the battle, you will earn sort of player scoring points. And then at the end of the scenario or at the end of the engagement, you will tally up the number of points that you have to see how your performance was evaluated. So if you get a lot of points, an excellent performance, you are promoted and given command of your own brigade, a remarkable achievement for a young officer. Huzzah. So there's a little bit of like personal role playing you can do if you choose to do it. It doesn't have any effect on really the rest of the game, but it is a really cool way to like kind of put you as like an individual on the battlefield. And, you can earn points for doing a whole bunch of stuff when you initiate melee, when you, escape capture, if you eliminate an enemy, if you capture an objective, all of that stuff. You can get positive. If you fail a morale check, you get negative. So I think that's just a really fun, interesting kind of wrinkle to this, that the designer was like, well, let's put you as the person moving all these counters as an individual on the battlefield. I think that's pretty neat. I'm not going to go through the whole rule book. I just wanted to show you that. But generally speaking, you're going to have movement and firing and combat, and the game is played with an activation system, so it's chip pull, but it uses cards, and I'll show you that in a moment, and it's all based on formation. So let me show you let's get to the component section, and I'll show you. So each unit in the game, these are leaders, so each infantry unit in the game is going to be one or more companies. And what's cool is that in this particular example, the number of figures on the counter represents the number of companies in that formation. So here you see an infantry battalion that's got 3 companies in it because there's 3 of these figures. These can be split into individual company-sized units. There are advantages to being with your battalion, specifically around rallying and melee combat. However, your firepower is not going to be as broad if you split out the battalions and form like a line. So I think that's a really neat part of this system, is that you can combine your units into a single counter or split them up into multiple counters, kind of like detachments, but obviously the formation of the day, the company. You've got leaders, you've got cavalry, you've got artillery. There's also in this game for artillery, not only is there the artillery piece itself, and it's rated for canister, which is this first number. It's rated for round shot. It's rated for shells and rockets. Some of them, you might have howitzers, for example. But there is artillery crews. So here you have an on-map artillery crew, and that crew needs to be stacked with that gun in order for it to move and fire. Additionally, to be in command, you also need to have an artillery leader, either with or adjacent to the combined crew and artillery. So there's a much deeper zoomed in look at the battlefield, where you're looking at our individual artillery crews and their guns to function properly. So that's going to be interesting when we get into gameplay. Different size counters, and we'll see those as I go through them for status and effects like that. The one last thing I wanted to show you, there are some optional rules, and I think I'm going to play for the channel with some of them. So yeah, here we go. So there's an option for when you take casualties, being able to merge units from a battalion into a single company, so that you can, basically fortify the strength of a particular company by mixing the soldiers in different companies. There's a panic optional rule. I might use this as well, which is, if a unit fails a morale check, then adjacent friendly units must undertake a morale check. That one's pretty easy to integrate, and I think probably will do a good job with the unpredictability playing solo. There are event cards in the game, and I'll show you those. This one just lets you make it so that if you use an event card, it can only be played once per game, so you have to go through your whole deck. And then finally, this is the one I think it's interesting that this is optional, because we're talking about company scale, but there's no actual facing in the game unless you play with the facing optional rule. And I think I'm going to play with the facing optional rule, because I think, when you get down to this level, you're talking about a company of like 100 guys, 110 guys, whatever it is. Facing is almost critically important for the action, the verisimilitude of what you're seeing happen in front of you. So I will play with facing. You can see here when you're in line, it's very common. You face a vertex. When you're in column, you have 2, bigger flanks and only a single front. And the rules are actually quite simple for dealing with facing. So we're going to play with that when I play through a scenario. That's the rule book. I think it's really well done based on what I've seen. Here is the companion book. This is going to be the scenarios and special rules and so forth. Again, spiral bound, very colorfully illustrated. There's a historical background here with a look at the entire battlefield of Waterloo and what this game covers. So there's 2 sort of engagements from the Battle of Waterloo that come in this box. One is Le Haye Saint here, and one is Hougoumont here. And so when I show you the maps, you'll see that. Really nice historical background showing the maneuvers and how, specifically, the battles around those particular landmarks went forward with the French attackers and British defenders. So that's really cool. Gives you a historical context to what you're doing. So here are all of the special rules for this particular box. What markers might mean, because we're so zoomed in, you can see here that you might have an open gate, or a hedgerow breach, or a destroyed gate, and that's going to allow you to move into these building compounds with your units. So really, really zoomed in stuff you don't usually typically see at the Napoleonic level. Hedgerows are, there's a formal gardens, there's the sand pit. We'll see that on the map. There's rules around how you enter a courtyard and how hedgerows affect things. And then, affecting these terrain features are what are called die roll dependent actions. This gives you the rules about how your units can try and breach a hedgerow or climb over a wall or breach a gate, that kind of things. What engineers can do. So there's a lot of stuff beyond just combat in here that's pretty cool that you can see at the company level that would probably be abstracted away in sort of a larger scale. Skirmishers play a big role in this game, like they did in First Victories, and I'll show you how that works when we start playing, but there are rules for skirmishers. And then we've got the scenarios. So there's, I think, 4 or 5 scenarios per sort of engagement. So here we have Hougoumont. En avant, this is the Hougoumont battle starting at 11:30. And this is probably a smaller setup. Here you can see the formation cards that are going to go in the deck and the 2 formations. These would be the 2 brigades, it looks like, because we've got, well, maybe, no, they would be the 2 battalions that would be a part of this, because each of these is a single company. It looks like they're all either sharpshooters or I forget what this symbol means, but like they're always in command. And then here's the allied, so they only have 1 card in the deck. This would be a very quick scenario to play. There's only 3 activation cards in the deck. 3 victory point locations. You've got some rifle armed Prussian units, it looks like, and the Royal Wagon Train. Then we've got Hougoumont starting at noon. So this is a 8-turn scenario. This looks like, we've got a few more formations being added. Here we have the 2nd Foot Artillery coming into the game, and obviously the Allies getting a bunch more formations as well. So as the assault on Hougoumont goes forward, you're getting more units. You've got another one. This is a 12:30 turn. So each turn in this game, by the way, is 5 minutes. So it's a very, very short period of time. And as you can see, more French formations in there. This is when the battle is really getting going. A really nice layout. And then we've got the Great Orchard. This takes place at 1:15 in the afternoon. This is an 8-turn scenario. So as you get further into the battle, there's different start points here for playing this scenario. And then here's the last hurrah, 7 p.m. This should be the end of the battle around Hougoumont. And there's a really nice painting. Lots of formations here, and so forth. I'm not going to go through everything, but I did want to show you that's 5 scenarios for Hougoumont. So here we come into La Haye Saint, Vanquish or Die, 1:30 in the afternoon. Some special rules. Here's the French order of battle, some reinforcements that they're going to get. Conditional reinforcements. The Anglo-Allies, this one's a lot bigger, it looks like. And as we go forward, you can see that La Haye Saint here's starting at 2:20. This is a 5-turn scenario. This might be the one I play on the channel. There's only 3 formations and 4 formations for the British, plus these Prussians, it looks like. Ney attacks, 6 p.m. at La Haye Saint. Much larger French order of battle, and so forth. So, and now you can do a 8 p.m. La Haye Saint starting point. And this is, you can see the French down to just the 13th line battalion, and the Anglo-Allies, just a couple there. There's also a training scenario, so this serves as the example of play. They give you the setup for it. This is the sand pit. You have basically 2 formations, plus a formation coming in on turn 2. Very small number of units, and then an example of play using that scenario to show you how the game plays, which is really nice. So you can play through it on your own, or you can read the example, or do both if you want. Again, really well put together here, and then all the charts and tables for the game are in the back of this booklet as well, but there's also player aids, so I won't go through those. All right, let's talk about the maps. So you get 2 maps in the game. These are a very, very nice, high-quality cardstock, the same kind that you saw in First Victories, Wellington versus Napoleon. Very thick, very nicely. These are going to stand up to a lot of wear and tear. And you can see some of the details here around Hougoumont. Very nicely done. It almost looks kind of like satellite imagery. Like the way that they did the artwork here is kind of, the color palette is very high contrast, which I like. And, some people don't like the caltrops hexes. I actually prefer caltrops hexes. I know that puts me in a minority. But as you can see, we've got some of the orchards around the gardens, the formal gardens itself. And then Lock and Load was kind enough to send me the canvas maps. So this is an optional add-on for the game if you would like, if you're interested. These are the same maps that come in the game, but they are printed on canvas, and you can see I'm kind of flattening it out right now. And they show the exact same detail. Just a really nice canvas material. I have the other one over here. I'll show you some of that. Here is, if I can get it open. Here's the woods around Hougoumont. There's the gardens. So these don't come with the game. They're an optional add-on. I think for people who really don't like plexi, but also hate mounted boards, if you're part of that tiny Venn diagram, these might be a good choice for you, because once they flatten out, you can just play directly on them, which I'm going to do, so I don't have to have plexi on my table. But these are great. These are really high quality paper maps, almost cardstock, I would say. So don't feel like you have to spend for the canvas maps. There was just a nice add-on that they included, so I can do this preview. All right, let's talk about counters. So let's see if I can get them out of here. Well, I'm having trouble pulling all of the sheets out. Here we go. Okay. So you get a lot of counters in this game. They're all pre-rounded. We have some control markers. Here are the player leader counters. Here are the casualties markers. So light, medium, heavy casualties will affect your morale and combat values, and you'll stack these underneath a unit. Here we see some British leaders. Leaders are not named, by the way. They're just at rank. So you've got lieutenants and colonels and brigadiers and captains. And as leaders die, they get downgraded in command value, or like a new leader takes their place at a lower rank, basically. It looks like some Prussians. I'm going to guess the gray is Prussian. I don't know for sure. Brunswick. Yeah, Hanoverians. Yeah, maybe they're Hanoverians. Maybe that's what this is. So you get a bunch of counter sheets in here. Here are the units. So here's the first line infantry. And you can see that we have single companies, and then we have full battalions when those companies are stacked together. So that's pretty nice. It's all formation based, so you've got all your different formations here. More French leaders, majors. Nice hats on them. We have got some Hanoverians and or Prussians. Again, I'm not quite sure. British cavalry leaders. What's interesting about this game is leaders can either be on their foot side or mounted side, and they can have their horse shot out from under them, which is kind of cool. Some more units. It's all very simple. The ratings, by the way, you've got your fire combat, melee combat, morale, and movement. So pretty easy to read. More French, as you would expect. Here we have the markers for ammo. So you are going to have low ammo in this system. Action completed when your units are done. Morale values, you have basically 2 chances to get out of a failed morale state, and then you are going to rout. More casualties markers. And then finally, some more French, and there's the turn marker. Here are some of the terrain markers, so you'll put these directly in the hex to show where a hedge breach has occurred, or terrain, like a wall has become rubble, and so forth. And here's a bunch more of those. So really nicely done. You also get a bunch of player aids. So here, and these are in kind of the same style, same construction as First Victories, if you've watched those. Here's a reminder of all the actions you can take when your formation activates, which is nice. So you're going to choose one, either range combat, move, melee combat, or a DRD, which is going to be a special action like climbing a wall and so forth. Here we have the fire combat table. So based on how far away you are and what your total combat value is, you're going to do a certain number of casualties. And this tells you how to do that. There's modifiers here and just some other rules represented. It seems like you can play this game completely off of the player aids once you've read the rules. I think it is a fairly simple to medium weight game. And if you've played any sort of war games before, you'll be kind of familiar with this. Here is the musket. So I think this might be... This is rifle. So this is the rifle table, much more deadly. Here's the musket table, obviously a lot less range here. So you've got those on one side or the other. You have got some reminders around morale checks and how those work, how terrain can affect the game, which is nice. A counter guide, stacking reminders, and the sequence of play on one. That's pretty nice. Here's the terrain effects chart, giving you the effects of the terrain and what the different markers mean. Here is marksman. So there are marksman units in the game, and they can only affect leaders, which is kind of interesting. Here's a marksman unit here. They're very small, but they specifically go after leaders, which is a really neat touch. At this level, it makes a lot of sense. Here's the artillery chart, how artillery works. So you've got a player aid for basically every unit type, so you can quickly and easily do that stuff. Here's another action summary showing you, like, well, what are the 4 actions I want to take and what can I do with them? That is single-sided. And then we've got the infantry square. So when you go into square, you can actually physically pull the units off the map and put them into kind of this square diagram and then replace them with a counter here. So you can see not only who the lead company in the square is, but also if anyone's sheltering in the middle of the square, which there are rules for. Your leaders and artillery crews can shelter inside the middle of the square so they don't get destroyed. So there's one of those for the French. There's one of those for the British. Here we have another player aid. This one is going to be melee. So it's kind of a differential system for melee. It tells you how to do that, what the modifiers are, what will happen to a leader in melee, and then what will happen from the melee attack. And then here is just a reminder about all the things that can cause a morale check and what happens when you fail, as well as the modifiers for that. A lot of this stuff you can put by the table. And here's an actual full sequence of play, which is really nice. Single-sided, as you can see, not a lot going on a turn. You draw a card, you activate your units, and then you draw another card and do that until it's over. So speaking of the cards, first of all, we got a red and blue die, obviously. So here are the activation cards, if I can get them out of here. So there's one card for every formation in the game, and what you're going to do on a turn is all the units, for all the formations that are currently on the map, you're going to shuffle these together in a deck, and then you're just going to flip them and activate. So it's a chip pull system done with cards. You can see that there's a lot of stuff in here. The chasseurs, these are all French, 4th Grenadiers, 3rd Grenadiers, 2nd Grenadiers, light infantry. These look like Prussians, maybe. Here's the Royal Wagon Train. So there is wagons can move around the battlefield, dropping off ammo, and they activate as their own formation. Foot Guards, 1st King's Dragoon. So there's a bunch of these activation cards. That's what's going to drive play. And then, like I said, you've also got event cards. So here's the British event deck. You're going to get 5 of these every turn, and you can play 3 of them. And so they do all sorts of different stuff. Lots of thematic things like fire starting or having an inspired leader. Like, for example, here, when a morale check is required, Wellington is seen on a nearby ridge and the shouts of God save the king echo across the battlefield. You get a +2 to your morale. Field promotion. Just a lot of stuff that can happen in the game that drives some more narrative elements and sort of the stuff you would expect to happen on a Napoleonic battlefield. There is a French deck as well. I glanced through these. I haven't looked at every card, but they do appear mostly symmetrical. So use of these cards is going to be kind of critical in specific contextual situations, which is kind of nice. And of course, there's a nice insert in here. So that is everything you get in Close Quarters Battle Waterloo, and a little bit about the game. I am actually going to play the game for the channel because Lock and Load was nice enough to send this to me, and I really have wanted to play this since I've seen it at these conventions. Seems like it would make a great solo experience because of the chip pull, and so we are going to do that. So look for that soon, and I hope you enjoyed this. Like I said, this should be, according to Lock and Load, going up for sale sometime in the next few weeks. They said end of the month, I believe, when I last talked to them. So don't quote me on that, but it should be quote-unquote soon. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the content.